All right, we're gonna get into the archives, our library wine club. Now this, of course, comes out every February with a couple of our single barrel and other releases. And every year we just kind of keep moving on down the line. And many of you know that we keep a pretty solid library program. It's something where we hold back X amount of cases. As soon as a wine is released, we have, in essence, a set amount that we sell through, and the rest stays in cold storage until we're ready to re-release them. And now we're moving on to a whole new round of them. And we're featuring 3 beautiful red wines for this library club shipment. There is also a very small amount of Riesling available that is an add-on to the shipment. That is something you can always shoot us, just reply directly to the email that you received where you click this link to get this video and let us know. We can always give you a little bit of Riesling to hold you over as well. That would be the 2018 release that we're featuring. There's only about 2 cases of it left, so if you need it, come and get it before it is gone. It'll go pretty quick. But to get into these red wines that will be in the shipment for sure, we're gonna start with some Pinot Noir, and then we have 2 of our Merlots that we're gonna get into. And this is gonna be the 2016 Pinot Noir. This is arguably the biggest and boldest Pinot that we made in our early days. And it is something that still now is like, oh my gosh, you can pair this up with a steak if you wanted to, almost. It is a combination of a few different clones. This is where we amped up our Pinot Noir production a little bit. We brought in a little bit more fruit, a couple of different clonal selections, and it was a ton of fun to work with. There were 4 different clones that made up this wine. We were talking 667 and 115, which have been the staples since the inaugural vintage of this wine. And then we have Pommard and 777 in here as well. Very similar to all vintages of this wine. It's about 33% new oak. Sometimes a little less than 30%, sometimes a little higher and closer to that third. But the oak program is pretty light-handed on this wine. I really want this to be something that lets the fruit shine, really has this nice beautiful pop of flavor, and leave that big, rich, kind of dark and brooding style Pinot Noir for the single barrel. So let's get into this guy. I actually honestly haven't been drinking a lot of 2016 recently. I've generally been hanging my hat on the 15 because that's in this just beautiful sweet spot right now. But to get this back out into the world officially, I'm very excited to do. So let's give her a shot. Okay, that's actually way better than I expected. So for those of you that remember the early days of our Pinot Noir, we released this wine and many of you wrote back to us like, Mike, this wine's great, but we don't want to wait 7 years to age it. It was a wine that was just massive. It was so big, so spicy, so intense, and I felt so bad. It was like right where what I wanted it to be. But I was like, man, you're right. It just needs more time. And I'll tell you what, now that we are I'm almost a full 6 years down the line, 6.5 years, 5.5 years down the line. Math's hard sometimes. It's there, like it's there. It still has a little bit of that really tart cherry, almost like it's almost like if a Sour Patch Kid wasn't that sour, but it still had that like tang to it. Like that's how it finishes. It's almost like mouth-watering, and it's really yummy, which is why I still love our early Pinots with food, because they have that structure to kind of cut through something that's a little creamy or a little bit rich or fatty. And this is awesome. I don't beat my own horn that much. I hate doing it. But many of you know how I describe Pinot and how obnoxious it can be to produce a good one. So when you have something that's got that extra age on it and it's tasting really well, you're like, oh yes, fine, thank goodness, I did it. It's a big sigh of relief when it's all said and done. Now, the beautiful thing I think about this wine and how it is smoothed out is that I think those really tart characteristics and the red fruits and kind of the intensity of it in the early days, it really did mask a lot of other things in there. And even the oak program, even though, I mean, like I mentioned, we're very light-handed with our oak program when it comes to our Pinot Noir. I'm very diligent and not going too heavy with it. But in order to really notice those characteristics, it takes some time for them to come out, because you have these big, bold flavors from the grape itself that really mask a lot of it. And this is at that point where like, oh, there's that butterscotch, there's that vanilla, there's that spice, and all of a sudden it just has these extra layers of flavor, and it's still big and it's still bold, but that complexity has gone through the roof over the last couple of years. I think the last time I drank the 16 regularly was probably about 2 years ago. And I always try it once a year to at least, if not a couple times a year, to see where it's at, but it hasn't been in my everyday drinking lineup, frankly, because the 2015 has been just drinking so well. We only have a little bit of that left, and to move into this and see this kind of start to supplant where that 15 is at, it's like, okay, this is exactly where it needs to be to get it back out in the world and start sharing it with people once again. So if you're a Pinot Noir fan, or if you just like big wines with big flavor but are at the same time kind of just light and easy drinking, this is gonna do you a solid. I'm super pumped to share this wine with you guys, and this is only the third release of our library club. This is the third time we've done this, and this is an amazing way to start it off. So you'll definitely be looking forward to a couple bottles of this at least when it gets to your door for sure. Next up on the list, we have our 2013 Merlot. So this has been Brittany, my HBIC's favorite wine for probably the last 5 years. It is something that I have to have like 6 bottles of it around the house no matter what, because she drinks this like it's going out of style. And for me, it's taken me some more time to get into it, because I'm a huge fan of the 2011, the 2012, which we featured in previous library club shipments, and of course when it was released initially, but I haven't been regularly drinking the 2013 Merlot. And it's something that, I try regularly, as I do with all of our wines each year, but it's not something that is that every day. And I'm in her camp at this stage. I'm so pumped with where this 2013 Merlot is at. It's gonna be something that we're gonna continue to try and share throughout the coming year during tastings and events, because it is in such a beautiful spot. And it also just made it a super easy shoe-in for the wine club this February. Now, 2013 was literally the 4th vintage that I'd ever made. This was the 4th vintage of Merlot. It was the first vintage of our single barrel Merlot. This was also the first year that we made a white wine. There was a lot of moving and shaking going on in this particular year. It was also really the second kind of big drought year that we had had. Of course, 2012 was a little warmer, a little drier, much more so than 2011. And 2013 continued suit. And we really didn't have our average rainfall hit for some time. It was very hot, very dry from 13 through 14, 15. It really wasn't until 16, if I remember right, then we had kind of a normal-ish weather pattern. This goes back to, just our roots and what started MTGA and why we still have Merlot as a flagship today. And I know many of you are huge Cabernet fans, and that's what you come to Napa for. And I'm so thankful that you let us give Merlot a little bit of a spotlight, because it's something that is truly a passion of mine. And it is something that if you let Merlot do its thing and you kind of cater to it a little bit, you can make it a nice, big, bold wine, and something that can stand the test of time. I mean, we're talking 9 years old, 8.5 years old, if you want to be, really on the dot about it. And this is when I love to drink Napa wines. And this is me being the wine geek, is that I love Napa wines, especially big reds, when they get to that like 8 to 12 year mark, because they soften up a little bit. There's a lot more complexity to them. They're silkier, they're sexier. It doesn't mean those current releases, those younger ones, aren't any good. They're very, very good. They're very solid. I love what they taste like. But when you get to this stage of a wine, it can be something special. This is when you start to go from like, oh, this is like really good, to like life-changing kind of territory when it comes to wine drinking. When you really start to mull it over, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is just something different and unique, and you can't get this kind of flavor from a young wine, in my opinion. You have to be built really patient, which is very hard to do, even for me, believe it or not. And it is something that you have to kind of plan for when it comes to like building out a wine collection or a cellar or closet space like we have here, or what's behind me on the rack. It's like you have to have space carved out for it. You have to be very diligent about it. And you want to have a few bottles of it laying around. That way you can try it every once in a while and see where it's at. So that's why we started our archives and our library club in the first place, is because we have some of these older vintages and we want to be able to share them with you and kind of give you that perspective of like, here's what happens when you wait to drink a wine. And luckily enough, you don't have to do the waiting. We've already done it for you. You can just start popping open bottles as you see fit. So let's go ahead and check this guy out. So 2013, 100% Merlot from here in St. Helena, literally about 2 miles from where I'm sitting. And it's rich, it's full bodied, it's silky. This is right now, as it's tasting, this is like my after work and a long day. I think I'm recording this on a Monday. So when you got yourself a case of the Mondays and you need to put your feet up on a Monday night and just kick back and relax, this is what you need. It's a wine that will still go great with food, but this is a kind of put your feet up and during the winter time, hang out by a fire pit, chill out in a hot tub, kick back, relax, and just ease into the evening kind of wine. And this is where I really love how our Merlots evolve in that sense, because they go from these really big, kind of more intense wines to very easy drinking, very silky, and there's still plenty of flavor. It's not like they've softened up. They just kind of, I don't know, some of the rougher edges smooth out a little bit, and they just become very easy drinking. This is one of those wines where all of a sudden the bottle's gone and you're not really sure how that happened between like two of you in like 45 minutes. You're like, oh, we each had like 2.5 glasses in pretty rapid succession. That was this last Saturday night for us and some friends. Sunday was a little tough. Anyway, this was a joy to make, because this was another Napa year where Mother Nature did kind of line it up for us in terms of our growing season and how we were able to process the fruit, and the fermentations went really well. The aging program, went just as we had expected. It was just solid all the way around, and that really comes through in this wine today. It's going to be something that I easily could last longer if you really wanted it to. But this is why we're getting it back into the archive shipment and into our wine club this February, because it is something that is also just ready to rock and roll right now. To round out this year's Archives Wine Club, we have our 2014 Merlot. So this one actually kind of has a fun story to it, because there was an amazing event that I hosted out in Ohio towards the end of last year. Some of you who are watching this, you know who you are. And the 2014 Merlot was a wine that was featured during that event. And I asked the folks that organized it, I was like, why would you pick the 14? Because that's, number one, it's been tucked away in our library. No one has purchased a bottle of it in a while. This is kind of like that secret wine, like if you knew about it, you were still buying it. And if not, it was mine to drink, which was kind of awesome. But they said, they heard that even years are always the really good years in Napa, which it can be true. I have plenty of folks that are like, no, the odd years are the best. But the even years in 16 and 14 and 18, they were all solid. Going back to 2012, they were all very, very solid. And it was so much fun to try. I really hadn't featured this wine with a group or an event or at all for a couple of years. We had tried it, every once in a while just to see where it was at, but it was really fun to, in essence, just crowdsource opinions of it, knowing that it was going to be released, 3 months later. So it was just a ton of fun. It's very similar to the 13. It's coming from the same vineyard. It's 100% Merlot, same processing and winemaking techniques. It is just that 1 year younger, and there's been one more drought season stacked on top of our growing seasons. So this one was pleasantly surprising that night, and still to this day it is. It's one of those wines that I think 14 as a vintage kind of gets lost in the shuffle. People usually gravitate towards 2012 or 2015, and people are really looking forward to like 2019 and 2021 now, of course. And 14 was one of those vintages in the last decade or so that just kind of fell through the cracks. It didn't, to my memory, and I could be wrong, but like just off the top of my head, it didn't have necessarily a lot of hype. The wines were still really, really excellent, but it was just kind of a good, solid year. There wasn't really anything that jumped out at people initially, but going back and trying this now, it's like, oh my gosh, like that's right. This year really had some good stuff to go on it. So I do want to compare and contrast this to the 13. The 13 being that, 1 year older. It's very silky. You're getting a little bit more of those earthier tones and barrel characteristics. It's a lot softer now than even what it was a year ago. And this 14 being 1 year younger, I haven't done this side by side in a while, so this is as much fun as it might be for you to watch me sip on one. I'm having a ton of fun like going through this lineup and being like, okay, let's see like how these compare and contrast a little bit. And right off the bat, the nose on the 14 is a lot more like darker fruit. It's a little richer. It just has a little bit more oomph to it still, just because of that, just that age difference. The 13 still is very complex, very beautiful, very aromatic, but it's a little bit more subtle. It's a little bit smoother. It doesn't quite jump out of the glass at you as much. Still very, very solid. The 14 just has a little extra punch to it right now. That being said, they taste very, very similar. The difference in aroma carries over a bit to the palate. The 14 also has a little bit more structure to it. It's a little chewier, I think, as a result. But realistically, they're peas in a pot. It's literally an older and younger brother that's sitting on the table next to me here. So this is why we do the Archives Club. It's to go back and try stuff like this and really see where they're at and have some experience with some older wines. This is now an 8-year-old Merlot. So it's something that is getting right into that sweet spot of where I love to drink Napa wines, and you can taste that. It's just aged beautifully in bottle over the last few years, and now that we can finally get it back out into the world, this is going to be something that will be in the Archives Club this year, and we might have a little bit left of it to go around for next year's as well. That's kind of the game plan. That way we can kind of try it a couple years back to back, see where she's at, and just can kind of taste that evolution as time continues to carry on. So that has been our Archives Wine Club shipment, the 2016 Pinot Noir, 2013 and 2014 Napa Valley Merlots. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know that this was a bit of a long one, so I hope you got some useful information. Of course, feel free to ask any questions in the comments. I try diligently to check those at least somewhat regularly, or you can reply directly to the release email and we can get any of those answered as well. So I really hope you enjoy these older vintages. Thank you again so much for your support, and I'm so glad that you're enjoying the club. These will be some great wines that are going to be heading your way here shortly.